A reclusive billionaire returned late to his office, only to be paralyzed by the sight of a small child, curled up like a discarded doll on the cold tile of the executive restroom. Her tiny shoes, scuffed and worn, were placed neatly beside her, a stark, heartbreaking detail against the grime that clung to her threadbare coat. Why would a child be sleeping on a bathroom floor in one of the most secure buildings in the city? And who had abandoned this small soul in a palace of cold marble and steel? Julian Vance did not build his empire by being sentimental, but the image before him short-circuited every defense mechanism he had meticulously constructed over 40 years. The silence of the 80th floor, usually a comforting blanket of isolation, now felt accusatory. He stood frozen in the doorway, the scent of industrial cleaner and expensive soap, an absurd backdrop to the raw poverty huddled on the floor. He was a man who controlled markets, who could shift fortunes with a single phone call. Yet he was rendered powerless by a sleeping girl who couldn't weigh more than 40 pounds. He took a step closer, his own polished leather shoes making a soft, intrusive sound on the marble. The child flinched, a tremor running through her small frame. A soft whimper escaped her lips. A single slurred name breathed into the sterile air. Marcus, no. The name hung in the air, a poison dart. Julian's blood ran cold. It wasn't the plea of a child having a bad dream. It was the ingrained terror of a recurring nightmare. He crouched down, his knees protesting the unfamiliar movement. He could see her face more clearly now, framed by matted brown hair. There was a faint, yellowish bruise blooming on her cheek, shaped vaguely like fingertips. A quiet, protective rage, an emotion he hadn't felt since his time in the service, began to smolder deep within his chest. It was a cold, clean fire, one that demanded action. This was not a simple case of a lost child. This was a message, a cry for help left in the one place its sender felt it might be seen. He thought of his own sister, Elena, gone so many years now, her laughter a ghost in the empty halls of his memory. He had failed to protect her. He would not fail this child. That vow solidified in his soul, as hard and unyielding as the diamonds his company mined. With a caution far beyond her years, when she saw Julian, a tall, imposing figure looming over her, she didn't scream. She simply shrank into herself, pulling his jacket tighter around her as if it were a shield. He saw the flicker of calculation in her gaze, assess the threat, make no sudden moves, be invisible. It was the survival instinct of a creature long accustomed to predators. Julian lowered himself to one knee, making himself smaller, less of a threat. "Hello," he said, his voice softer than he'd used in years. "My name is Julian. You're safe here." The girl said nothing. She just watched him, her small chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. He didn't press her for a name. Instead, he reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a small, wrapped protein bar he always kept for late nights. He opened it and held it out on his flat palm, as one might offer food to a frightened stray. She watched the bar, then his face, then the bar again. After a long moment, her tiny, chapped hand darted out, snatched the offering, and retreated back under the coat. Minimized, he waited patiently while she ate in small, furtive bites, her eyes never leaving him. The silence was broken by the chime of the private elevator, followed by frantic footsteps. A woman appeared in the doorway, her face pale with panic. She was elegantly dressed, but her hair was disheveled, her mascara smudged. "Lily! Oh, thank God!" she cried, rushing forward. The little girl, Lily, stiffened, dropping the half-eaten bar. Behind the woman, a man appeared. He was handsome, impeccably dressed, with a smile that was both charming and predatory. It was a smile Julian had seen 1,000 times in boardrooms, a mask of confidence hiding a vacuum of integrity. "There you are, you little rascal," the man said, his voice a smooth, practiced balm. "You gave your mother quite a scare." He placed a proprietary hand on the woman's shoulder. Julian rose to his full height, the protective rage simmering just beneath his calm exterior. "I found her sleeping on the floor," Julian stated, his tone flat and cold. The woman, Amelia, flushed with embarrassment. "I am so sorry, Mr. Vance. I was here for a consultation with your marketing department. I only turned my back for a second." Lily has to erase the truth of the bruise on the child's cheek and the terror in her voice. Julian's vow hardened into granite. He would not be dismissed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, a simple, elegant piece of cardstock with only his name and a private number. He handed it not to Marcus, but to Amelia. "Your daughter left her coat," he said, indicating his own jacket still wrapped around Lily. "Please keep it. And if you or Lily ever need anything at all, you call this number, day or night." He held Amelia's gaze, trying to communicate everything he couldn't say. "I see you. I know something is wrong. I can help." For a fleeting second, he saw a glimmer of desperation in her eyes before Marcus's grip tightened on her arm, and the mask of the happy, flustered mother fell back into place. "Thank you, you're too kind," she murmured, quickly pocketing the card as Marcus guided her and a silent Lily away. Julian watched them go, the sound of their footsteps echoing down the long, empty corridor. The game had begun. The moment the elevator doors closed, Julian was in motion. His first call was to his head of security, a former Mossad agent named Kale. "I want all footage from the 45th floor and the executive elevator bank for the last 6 hours, Julian commanded, his voice clipped and precise. "I want to see everyone who came and went with a child. Discreetly, Kale. No one is to know I am looking." Within 30 minutes, the files were encrypted and on his desktop. He watched the footage, his jaw tightening with every frame. He saw Amelia arrive with Lily and Marcus. He saw Amelia being led into a conference room. Then, he saw Marcus holding Lily's hand in a grip that was far too tight, leading her not to a waiting area, but towards the service corridor that connected to the executive stairwell. He reappeared on the footage 20 minutes later, alone. He had not been searching for her, he had hidden her. He had abandoned a 5-year-old child in an empty, sterile part of the building, as if she were an inconvenience to be disposed of. The cold, calculated cruelty of it stoked the fire in Julian's gut. This was not just neglect. This was a deliberate act of emotional violence. Shuddered. "I saw nothing, Mr. Vance. I just clean. I'm not asking you to be a witness in court," Julian said gently. "I'm asking you to help a child who I believe is in danger. Anything you've seen, no matter how small, could be important. I give you my word, you will be protected." He saw the conflict in her eyes, the fear of losing her job versus the innate decency of a good person. After a long, tense silence, she finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I have seen them before. The mother, she is nice, but sad. The man, Mr. Thorne, he is not nice when he thinks no one is watching." She recounted seeing Marcus jerk Lily's arm in the hallway, hissing at her to be quiet and stop being a nuisance. She had seen Lily left alone in empty offices for hours while Amelia was in meetings, with strict instructions not to move or make a sound. "Once," Maria said, her eyes welling with tears, "I found her in a supply closet. She had a little book of drawings. When Mr. Thorne found me there, he smiled at me, but his eyes, they were so cold. He took the book from her and told her drawing was a waste of time for stupid little girls. The look on her face, I will never forget it. The drawings, that was the key, a child's nonverbal testimony." Julian thanked Maria, assuring her that her job was secure and that she had done the right thing. He now had corroboration. Marcus Thorne was not just a liar, he was a monster who hid behind a veneer of charm. And Julian Vance was going to tear that veneer away, piece by painful piece. Julian knew that witness testimony and his own gut feeling were not enough. He needed something concrete, something undeniable that would shatter Marcus Thorne's carefully constructed world. He needed a weapon. He made another call, this time to David Chen, a man whose name did not appear in any public record. David had been Julian's second-in-command in a special operations unit, a ghost who specialized in digital forensics and covert acquisitions. "I have a new project for you, David," Julian said, his voice low. "The target is Marcus Thorne. I want everything: financials, associates, past relationships, digital footprint. I want to know what he had for breakfast and what he dreams about at night. Most importantly, I want to find out what he's hiding." High-end, climate-controlled storage unit under a false name. It was a loose end, a tiny thread of carelessness in an otherwise meticulous deception. For a man living in his fiancée's lavish home, a secret storage unit was a glaring red flag. "It's where he keeps his leverage," David surmised. "Old records, mementos from past conquests. Men like him are narcissists. They keep trophies." Julian's resources made the impossible possible. A discreetly obtained warrant, citing suspected financial fraud, was executed in the dead of night. Julian and David were there when the heavy metal door rolled up. The unit was mostly filled with boxes of financial documents and expensive clothes, the remnants of his previous lives. But in the back corner, tucked under a dusty tarp, was a small pink plastic bin. It was labeled Lily's junk. Julian's hands tightened into fists. He lifted the lid. Inside were discarded toys, outgrown clothes, and at the very bottom, a child's drawing tablet. It was a simple, inexpensive device. Julian pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life and his breath caught in his throat. It was Lily's voice, screaming from a digital canvas. There were hundreds of drawings, a chronological story of her life since Marcus had entered it. The early ones were bright and cheerful, a smiling stick figure of her and her mom, houses with sunny faces, colorful flowers. Then a new figure appeared, a tall man in a black suit. At first he was smiling next to them, but slowly the drawings changed. The colors grew darker. The man's smile became a jagged, angry line. There were drawings of Lily's mom crying. There were drawings of the man with his hand raised. Then came the most damning series, a picture of Lily being pushed into a dark room, labeled the quiet room. Another of her alone in the dark, tears streaming down her face. And the final, most recent drawing, a monstrous, shadowy figure with sharp teeth and cold, empty eyes. Underneath it, in a child's shaky scrawl, was the name Marcus. It was the smoking gun. It was the irrefutable, heartbreaking testimony of a silent victim. Julian held the tablet in his hands, the cold rage within him crystallizing into a plan. He now had his weapon, the hunt, Lily's drawings, her expression hardening with each image. When the final picture of the monster appeared, she looked up at Julian, her eyes blazing. "The man is a predator," she stated, her voice devoid of emotion but laced with steel. "And the mother is a victim herself, likely under coercive control. We can't just go to the police. A man like Thorne will have her so psychologically manipulated, she might even defend him. We need to sever his control over her before we can save the child." Their strategy was twofold. First, they had to get Amelia away from Marcus. Julian remembered the desperation he had seen in her eyes. He had to leverage it. He instructed his office to contact Amelia with a lucrative, time-sensitive, and entirely fictional business proposal related to her former career in art curation. It was a project that required her immediate and solitary attention for a 2-day creative retreat at a secluded luxury spa. It was a bait she couldn't refuse, a chance to reclaim a piece of the identity Marcus had been systematically erasing. As they predicted, Marcus encouraged her to go, likely seeing it as an opportunity for her to network and further enrich him. The moment Amelia's car passed through the gates of the spa, she was met not by a concierge, but by Evelyn Reed. Gently but firmly, Evelyn, with a female trauma counselor present, showed Amelia everything. The financial records proving Marcus was robbing her blind, the evidence of his past deceptions, and finally, the drawings from Lily's tablet. The effect was shattering. The carefully constructed reality Amelia had been living in crumbled around her. Denial gave way to horror, then to a mother's fierce, protective grief. The woman Marcus had controlled was gone, replaced by a woman determined to save her child. While Evelyn secured Amelia's cooperation, Julian and David prepared for the public demolition of Marcus Thorne. The perfect venue presented itself: the inaugural Thorne Foundation for Children's Futures charity gala. It was the pinnacle of Marcus's deception, an evening where he would stand before the city's elite, basking in their admiration and their donations, a wolf masquerading as a shepherd. It was there, at the height of his hubris, that Julian would tear him down. David handled the technical aspects, securing remote access to the ballroom's audio-visual, was completely unprepared. As he basked in the applause following his speech, he noticed Julian Vance walking toward the stage. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face, quickly masked by his public smile. "Mr. Vance," he said into the microphone, his voice dripping with condescending charm. "An unexpected honor. Have you come to make a donation to our noble cause?" Julian didn't answer him. He walked past Marcus to the lectern, his presence alone commanding the room into a stunned silence. David, from a remote location, switched the feed. The massive screen behind the stage, which had been displaying the Foundation's logo, flickered and changed. The first image that appeared was a still from the Vance Tower security footage. Marcus, his face a mask of irritation, gripping Lily's arm and pulling her toward the service corridor. A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Marcus's face paled. "This is some kind of technical glitch," he stammered, trying to regain control. "An absurd prank." Julian's voice, amplified by the microphone, was calm, cold, and devastating. "This is no glitch, Mr. Thorne. This is the truth." The screen changed again, displaying Marcus's fraudulent financial records. A web of deceit showing money being funneled from the charity into his offshore accounts. The murmurs grew louder, turning to gasps of shock. "And now," Julian said, his voice dropping slightly, "I want to introduce you to the lead artist whose work inspired Mr. Thorne's so-called foundation." The screen went dark, and then the first of Lily's drawings appeared. A happy girl and her mother. The crowd was confused. Then, the next drawing, with the dark figure of Marcus. Then another and another. A silent, terrifying story unfolded on the giant screen. The bright, cheerful ballroom became a tomb of horrified silence. The only sound the soft click as each new image appeared. The drawing of The Quiet Room elicited a collective gasp. When the final image, the monster with Marcus's face, filled the screen, a woman in the front row began to sob. Marcus was frozen. His mask of charm melted away to reveal the panicked, ugly creature beneath. He lunged for the lectern, screaming, "Lie!" The handcuffs on his wrist? The spell was broken. The monster was just a man, small and pathetic in his ruin. Julian Vance stepped back, his work done. He had given a voice to the silent, and the entire world had finally heard her scream. The fall of Marcus Thorne was swift and total. The gala became a crime scene, and the city's elite, who had been his patrons moments before, were now witnesses to his disgrace. The subsequent investigation and trial were a formality. Faced with the mountain of financial evidence and the powerful, silent testimony of Lily's drawings, Marcus was convicted on multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and child endangerment. His name became a byword for deceit, a cautionary tale whispered in the very circles that had once celebrated him. Amelia, with the support of Julian and intensive therapy, began the long process of healing. She had to confront her own complicity, the fear that had paralyzed her and allowed the abuse to continue. In an act of profound maternal love and self-awareness, she petitioned the court to grant Julian full legal guardianship of Lily. "I need to heal myself before I can be the mother she deserves," she tearfully confessed to him. "I can't ask her to wait for me, but I can ask the best man I've ever met to protect her while I do." Julian accepted without hesitation. His life, once a solitary pursuit of wealth and power, now had a singular, sacred purpose. He sold the sterile penthouse on the 80th floor. He bought a sprawling, light-filled house on the coast, a place with a large garden and a view of the endless ocean. The stark black and white of his old life were replaced by the warm tones of wood and the vibrant colors of Lily's new drawings, which were now framed and hung on every wall. The transformation in Lily was slow but steady. For the first few months, she remained largely silent, communicating through her art and her actions. She would leave a brightly colored drawing of a flower on his desk, or slip her small hand into his during their walks on the beach. He never pushed her to speak. He simply created a world for her that was predictable, safe, and filled with unwavering affection. He learned to bake her favorite cookies, read her the same bedtime story 100 times, and build magnificent sandcastles that they would watch the tide reclaim. He was no longer just Julian holding up her sketchbook. On the page was a new drawing. It was a picture of two people, a tall man with kind eyes, and a small girl with a bright, genuine smile. They were holding hands in front of their seaside house, and above them, a giant yellow sun shone down. Julian's heart swelled. He felt a familiar sting behind his eyes, but this time, it was not from grief for the past, but from an overwhelming gratitude for the present. Lily pointed from the man in the drawing to Julian, then from the girl to herself. Then she looked up at him, her brown eyes clear and bright, the old clouds of fear completely gone. "We're home," she said, her voice small but perfectly clear. Two simple words that stitched together the broken pieces of both their souls. Julian pulled her into a gentle hug, the scent of sea salt and crayons filling his senses. In protecting her, he had saved himself. The ghosts of his past had not vanished, but they had finally found peace, quieted by the sound of a little girl's laughter carried on the ocean breeze. In the end, we find that true evil often wears the most charming smile, hiding its rotten core behind a facade of success and public adoration. It thrives in the silence of its victims and the reluctance of witnesses, growing stronger in the shadows of fear and denial. But we also learn that goodness does not always need to shout. Sometimes it is a quiet, unwavering force, the stoic resolve of a protector who sees what others choose to ignore. It is the strength to offer a coat to a shivering child, to listen to an unspoken story told in crayon, and to stand against a powerful monster, not with rage, but with resolute truth. How many silent victims are telling their stories in ways we are not trained to hear? And what does it take for a hero to step out of the shadows, not to fight a war, but to simply listen to a child? The journey of Julian and Lily is a testament to the fact that the deepest wounds can be healed, not by erasing the past, but by building a future filled with safety, trust, and unconditional love. True strength is not the power to dominate, but the courage to protect.